All right, everybody. Thank you for sticking around. What a powerful movie. A lot of different moving parts, a lot of different themes were involved in that. That was my third time watching it, and I cried every single time. Would you say? I would? Oh, you too? Yes, yes. My name is Clem Herod. I am the owner of Clem Co., owner and chief projection officer, and my fraternity brother, Frank Crum, asked me to be a part of this film series, and I was definitely honored to do so. One of the thoughts that was going through my head as I was standing backstage is how I remember being a high school kid dealing with trauma in my life and working in a movie theater. And now, here I am in a historic movie theater doing a panel discussion about kids dealing with high school, and trauma in their lives. Talk about full circle. At this time, I would like to bring some of our panelists to the stage. We have Damian Mosley. We'll have Joe and Cynthia Craig and Dr. Nikisha Hammond. Please join me upstage, please. I'm just about to go get it. All right, thank you for joining us. You can sit right there with that purple microphone. Perfect. Talking about taking some notes. Yeah. First impressions.
The movie was great, very emotional, touched some inner emotions for me personally, but great experience, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia.
My first impression was, this is a nice family, and it was, to me, it seemed like family dynamics of what we struggle for in our generation, for the family to live in the suburbs and raise our families right and have the right schools and do the right activities and those kinds of things.
Yeah, all those different things. How's it going, Joe? So Joe, one of the things that we were just talking about was the overall first impressions of that film.
It was interesting. Much like my wife, my first impression was, okay, nice family. This family, seems to be enjoying the American dream. They seem to, be living life and, enjoying what comes with life. And just an, modern, average, everyday family.
Right, yeah. You definitely get that from, first seeing everything, right? Dr. Hammond, first impressions.
First impressions, it was really difficult to watch as a mental health professional, as a mom, as a community member, especially for the son, because I felt myself throughout the movie. I mean, you see him obviously breaking down and spiraling down, and it's just the psychologist in me is like, we gotta save him, right? And then the mom in me is just like, okay, come on. Like, I felt like I was rooting for him. And then, of course, we see what happens, which is so tragic. So it was very difficult to watch on multiple levels.
Yeah, I would agree. There was that sense of, that young and that free love that they experienced, and yeah, the aspect of the athlete who's dating the cheerleader, right? In this opening scene, you know, one of the things that stood out to me after watching it the second time, I didn't pick up on the first time, and I watched it with the subtitles. And during this, his coach is yelling at him, you know, motivating the boys, right? And they repeat these statements in two separate scenes. Things like, there is no second place. You better come into every match with a plan because your rival has a plan. If you don't have a plan, it will manifest in your defeat. You will lose. I was going to you too. You said, What are your thoughts on a statement like that? And can you recall or have any experience of that exposure to your life?
I would say absolutely. I feel like I live my life with that voice, so to speak, in my head. I always strive to be the best at whatever it is that I do. I always feel a sense of urgency, if you will, to perform at a very high level in whatever it is I put my hands to do. And I can't speak to exactly where that comes from, but it's innate in my being. And I think just as a black male, it resonates with me because I can understand the sense of urgency, if you will, to accomplish despite all odds, so to speak. And balancing that drive and that desire with the realities of your everyday situation, the realities of your circumstances, and the realities of your abilities, I think is really key for us to really instill in our young men. So it's that keeping that drive, but at the same time understanding the realities of your situation and of your background and just everything that's involved in your situations. And my heart really goes out when I see, you know, movies like this and just, you know, things in media, because I can relate to the drive, and I can relate to the desire to want to achieve at a higher level, but still keep in mind the balance.
Right.
You know,
Balance
the balance
is-
between reality and that drive.
Right. Which is, as someone who kind of experiences some of those feelings, right? All of our stories are different. You know, one of the reasons why I asked you to be on the panel is, you know, through stories and conversations that stories we've shared, conversations we've had, you know, as black men, kind of feeling some of that, right? And thinking about one of the things I've told my son is, like, when I'm trying to give you advice and trying to talk to you, it's because not only am I 30 years older than you, but I've survived to this point. That's a huge statement to tell your son, right? Joe and Cynthia, you know, you mentioned about the American dream. What are some of the things that you feel like influenced your views on your version, in your shared version, your individual and shared versions of the American dream?
Well, my parents were from Mississippi, and the American dream for them started with a struggle. And the struggle was always, you know, my mom, my grandmother were like maybe 1 or 2 generations removed from slavery. So, of course, being in Mississippi, you were still kind of sort of in the segregation, the discrimination, the separatism that went on in society. Even when I went to high school, there was separatism. We had separate proms from the white people. And it was always that drive and that push to do better, to be better, to work harder, And even when I finished college, I remember always going to every job feeling like I had to crush it. I had to be better than everyone else that didn't look like me. You know, so it was like I had to work longer, and I still carry that. I had to work longer, I had to work harder, I had to be better. And that came from generational, striving to do better and to be equal. But in order to be equal, you had to do better.
Yeah, for me, a similar situation. I was born and raised in South Carolina, and it was very similar. The segregation, the separate events. I can remember there were multiple places around my hometown where we were able to, a couple of restaurants, we were able to get food from those restaurants, but we had to go around to the back. There was no walking through the front door. There was one particular restaurant in particular. You couldn't even go to the back door. You could pull up to the parking lot, and someone from the kitchen would bring your food. They didn't want you on the steps. But my mom and my dad both, would say that's okay, because one of these days you're gonna be better than that. And so the American dream started for me in the pictures that my mom and dad painted of a society where, I could walk through that front door if I chose to. A society where, I could have my own. I could have my own restaurant. I didn't need theirs, if I wanted to. So I grew up thinking, that's what the American dream was that I could have my own, I could do, what I wanted to do. And my mother and father both instilled that in me.
That foundation, right? Setting that foundation, which I feel like is a huge part of our community, or a community, we'll say community, right? Just trying to be, think holistic, especially, I know like for me, the foundation, huge foundation was the church and growing up there. And, just looking at this scene and the sun, because when I was thinking about the process of trying to memorize the actors or the characters' names, I didn't, because I wanted to be like the wife, or we later find out the stepmom, the son, the daughter, and the father, from that sense of not putting a name to it because it could be anybody, right? And in a way, it's all of us, in a sense. Talking to someone as they were walking through, who's seen this film before, mentions it's a lot. This movie is a lot.
It really is.
It's so many micro themes in it. One of the things that I love is like that father and son moments to try to bond and working out. And even, like Joe, you mentioned the ability to one day have your own. And they were on the job site, whether he was the owner of the business, the foreman, the general contractor, there was a sense of ownership, right? And then trying to teach his son how to build for the community and thinking about the future. Dr. Hammond, what experiences have you had or seen working with youth and trying to help them to manage some of the stress that's coming into their lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'm a huge advocate of teaching kids how to manage their emotions, because in life, we're all going to be challenged with different things, whether it's in our relationships, in our jobs, in our friendships, or whatnot. But what I've seen now is that it really is a lot for kids to bear right now, especially over the last couple of years with COVID coming in. all of the disruptions, the world's flipped upside down. We see what's going on right now overseas. Like, it's so much, and they have access to social media. So it's just, I remember, don't want to tell my age too much, but growing up, there was no social media. So, and I wasn't really interested in the news, frankly, when I was a kid, when I was my son's age. But now all of them have access to social media. They see things, they're learning about things, and for them to have to process all that, depending on what home, and I mean, again, this is just a movie, but there may not be anybody at home to help you process through, like, this is sad, this is heavy, this is a lot to handle, which leads to what we see in the schools, which leads to the expulsions and the bullying, the suspensions, poor grades, all of those different types of things. So one of the things I always recommend as community leaders, whether you have kids or not, is to make sure we're checking in on our youth, because that's so important. When you really ask a child or a teen, how are you doing, and no one else has asked, like, it's very powerful, and for them to feel that someone cares. So that's the thing I think we're missing a lot of. And even in this movie, again, the mental health professional in me is like, okay, where is the mental health advocate? Like, where is the advocacy? How are you doing? I get sports are important, but like, how are you coping? Like, this child obviously got addicted to medication, and I mean, just again, spiraled down, but who cared about his self-care? Who was championing him when he's destroying his room? Like, who is helping him deal with his emotions? So that's one of the things I think overall is really lacking, is helping our kids understand, how do you manage and process everything that's happening in the world and in your home?
There's layers. So I'm going to come back to that. In this scene, like, you're one of the things that the father said was, if you did it the way I taught you, you would have had him 20 minutes earlier. Right? It's some of that pressure of, like, I've lived it, I've done some of it, just follow my instructions.
Right.
Damien, what are some of your feelings, just thinking about this, or even thinking about, like, in this moment, he's sitting in the doctor's office by himself, right? He doesn't have that help to be there to influence him, to guide him, that support.
That was one of the scenes that resonated with me, because in that scene, I was wondering, he has a father in his life, he has a mother in his life. Why is he there at the doctor's office alone? And that was a big question mark for me, because when we're faced with some of life's biggest decisions, at that point, it kind of resonated with me, because I'm thinking, who do you truly have in your circle, and at what points are they in your decision making?
How intimate can you get with those people and open up about some of those fears and issues?
So I'll say this. Personally, I was the first person in my immediate family to graduate from college. My mother and my father were together for over 40, 50 years almost, and neither one of them were college educated. So the individuals that had the most influence in my life as it relates to education were not my parents, and they were men of our fraternity, alpha man, and they had tremendous influence on my life. So that scene resonated with me, because I'm like, you're making a decision that's this grave, and you have people that care about you, but they're not involved in that very, very, very important decision. And my immediate question was why. I think one of the things that we can get across to the youth, if you will, is that you always have to have that inner circle, or that camaraderie amongst people that you trust, even if they're not in your immediate family, that you can rely on when it comes to making very, very important decisions. Yeah. So that's one thing I think, in my opinion, is very, very, very important that we relate to the youth is that even if it's not an immediate family member, you always have to have an inner circle that you trust, that you can confide in, if you will, and kind of, talk to about very, very important decisions in your life.
Dr. Hammond, can the adolescent mind even process information that heavy and that life-changing? Because he clearly went back out.
No, they
Exactly.
literally don't have the brain capacity.
No, they don't.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that having that influence in that person, that mentor, that whomever, is I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Right. Cynthia, any thoughts there?
And I was listening to what he was saying, and I thought the same thing with the doctor scene. Where were his parents? But then I had to remember, as a parent, when the child turns 18 years old, society says you're grown. And they allow the children to go to the doctors without their parents. And my thought process was, this young man went to the doctor. He didn't want to disappoint his father. So throughout the movie, I saw that there was that pressure not to disappoint the coach, not to disappoint the girlfriend, not to disappoint the father, to stay on everybody's good side. So he self-medicated to hide and mask the pain that he was in. And then he went to the doctor and got some heavy news and came home and told no one. So for me, I'm a social worker. So the first thing I thought was, what is society doing to our children? Because at 18, you're still a child. And you should not be allowed at 18 to receive something like that without a parent. So that's how it affected me, because I'm thinking, this man should have called the parents with this kind of news, because now that child, 18 or not, had to deal with that by himself, or he chose to because of pressure.
I didn't even think about that, the whole 18 as an adult thing. I didn't realize that was a thing there. But then there's like the 18 or the child in the sense of wanting to be grown.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me anything. I know what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Right? Joe, once you see this scene here. The world, this is the quote, because I told you I did the caption. I pulled up the caption. The world don't give you shit. The world don't give a shit about you or me. You are not afforded the luxury of being average. Got to work 10 times as hard to get anywhere. I don't push you because I want to. I push you because I have to.
Before he answers, we have had this conversation with our daughters 15,000 times, the exact same conversation. So I laughed, and we laughed when we saw that scene because we knew the words verbatim, and we said it exactly like that.
That's an emotional, scene, for me, because it takes me back to exactly what she's referring to. We've told them many times,
The world doesn't care about you.
The world doesn't care about you. We do.
Said it last week.
we continue to say it, to them to this day. And on one hand, I think that they understand it and they finally get it, but then I question myself and I think to myself, they don't get it. they don't get it. But then I think if they, whether they get it or they don't get it, I must continue to say it, because as long as they are out here in the world, that's going to be true. They are going to encounter people who have bad intentions, people who don't have their best interests at hand. And I feel like as a parent, even though they're grown, I still have to constantly remind them. And it's not to say, don't do this or don't do that, but keep in the back of your mind that, when you engage in certain things, or you go out and you do certain things in life, you always have to be cautious. There always has to be some reservation. That's not to say you don't move forward, but always in the back of your mind, you have to have, some reservation, and understand that there is bad intention out there for you. So you need to move forward cautiously.
And if you don't, there are alternatives that
There are alternatives out there that are not that good for you.
Right. Right.
And especially when you have a son. I mean, we don't have sons, but I have friends who have sons, and the pressure is even greater because of the climate of the world now, the mistrust of the police, to have a conversation with a young black boy about how to encounter the police, someone who's supposed to protect and serve you, is pressure within itself for a parent to have that conversation, and then you send your child out into the world to live and have to remember that conversation. So, we have girls, once again, Sandra Bland. It happens. And as African American people, we have to live that life. Mm-hmm. We don't want to scare our kids about going out into the world, but you have to scare our kids about being safe in the world. So what other conversations do you have? The talk. Everybody knows what the talk is.
Yeah, it's interesting. The going down the lines of thinking about, you're saying black people, African American people, then you just think about the, as a whole, society, we're getting into this, BIPOC, black, indigenous, just overall people of color, and thinking about daughters. You all have daughters, and Dr. Hammond, you have a young son, right? So in what ways do you think are, from a professional standpoint, of trying to navigate some of those realities that people face, or fears that people feel?
Yeah, I think it's so critically important. I've always said that, and my son knows too, that of course, because of, all sorts of different identifying ways of race, ethnicity, and culture, our society is here to judge. This is the world we live in. But if we take an opportunity to help youth understand that just because the world around you doesn't think your hair, your eye shape, your skin color, whatever it is not good enough, like those things obviously aren't true. They're very socially constructed. But if we take the time to explain to them their features, their accent, or whatever it is that they have about them that make them unique, like that is okay. You are okay in who you are. And it sounds really basic, but it's something that's very powerful, and more youth need to hear that, and sort of almost build up this emotional armor, if you will, to live in the society that we live in. So I've always said that's pretty important for us to be doing, especially because a lot of the research shows with bullying, especially racially, bullying about race or ethnicity or different parts of us that we can't quote unquote change, has a more detrimental impact for youth. And we can go on and on about the suicide rates and all of the negative effects of it, of the discrimination and prejudice and racism that happens. So I think it's just very important that we're having conversations, which I'm seeing more happening, thank goodness, for our youth, about who they are and that they are okay and who they are and what they bring to the world. Because again, there's a lot of people that are going to tell them differently.
Yes. And thinking about friends and people, other people in the community, other people in our lives or our children's lives, there are certain aspects of things that people just don't experience for themselves, right? So it's like understanding how to show sympathy and how to be empathetic for other people's situations. You may not have someone who has or know someone who has or you may not personally have some family member or know someone in prison, but that doesn't mean that your friend doesn't have that life experience. This situation's a little different, but in a situation where if it were a single dad raising a daughter, that may not be your situation. You may have had two parents in your household, but that doesn't take away from that person's lived experience. In the situation, like I remember in this film, he says, "I'm sorry for putting this on you. I have no one else to talk to."
Yeah.
He wasn't getting mental health for himself, and probably didn't see that growing up. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, or certain influences in his life or society said that it wasn't okay. It was beautiful to see the husband and the wife trying to share a moment and come together and bond through the trauma, even as she was trying to heal in her own way. She just let me grieve. This is how I grieve. People grieve and deal with traumas differently. But then at the end, we pray and hope that we feel some sense of freedom from those stressors, from that trauma, and trying to find joy in our lives. How do you try to share joy and love with people?
How do I share love and joy with people? First and foremost, I think I try to have love and joy for myself. So, number one for me is making sure that I'm okay. Because if I'm okay, then I'll project that to others. So when I'm going through something, so to speak, or dealing with something very heavy, what I tend to do is, I'm a Christian, so I get in the Word. I wake up early in the morning, I study the Word. I read the Bible, I pray, I meditate on what the Scriptures are saying, and I just allow the Spirit of God to speak to me and heal me first. And then from that place, I project that to others. So that's how I would answer the question. I would say first, I'm cognizant of the fact that I need to be okay first before I project that to others. And my source of health, healing, peace, security is always the Word of God and the Spirit of God. So that's how I manage things in my life personally.
No complaints. I mean, that's beautiful, right? Understanding your own personal journey and what you need to go through and process to get to that space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share?
I just want to say I love that answer because it is so important that we're taking care of ourselves because if we can bring the best version of ourselves to other people around us, family, friends, community, I mean, that's what it's really about. So I was like, yes, when you said your response.
Thank you.
For some reason, that just takes me right back to, again, being in church with my grandmama and singing the song. And everybody knows the song, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. That just takes me back. And I think personally, that's how you bring joy to others. You start by, letting your light shine, diving into the Word, getting that source of inspiration that you can then show everybody. Sometimes giving joy to others, it doesn't always have to be something active. Sometimes it can be passive. And, the passive portion of that is just your demeanor, the way that you are carrying yourself that day, the smile that you have. You never know how contagious that can be to others.
Absolutely.
There's when I wanted to come up with actually I didn't want to come up with it. I feel like a title just kind of hit me with watching this movie and trying to think about this panel discussion. And it was, "What a Difference a Day Makes," which was a song by Dino Washington that was singing. They referenced it twice in the movie. And one of the things that I like to do is, I'm huge on my sharing my thoughts in my social media. And this, like I've mentioned, is a huge moment for me. So I get a lot of my thoughts out. It's like almost my therapy in a way to do my post and getting those thoughts out. So part of it was sharing this moment. And if I were to look at this moment on my social media feed, or when I look at this moment on my social media feed, I want to capture it for what it is and the joy and the beauty that it is. And and I would have the caption to read something like this. What a difference a day makes. A day. One single day. Every day is a moment, and every moment leads to another moment. We choose who we spend our moments with. The people who you have in your life affect who you are, and the people you come to have and continue to have in your life will affect who you will become. Choose your interactions, choose your actions, and choose your reactions wisely, because every moment of every day matters. See it, believe it, achieve it. Projection 101.
Awesome.
Thank
you. Words of inspiration.
Yeah. So, thank you all. Thank you all for being here, staying, and being a part of this conversation. I want to thank the City of Tampa and the Tampa Theater, Brother Crum, Frank Crum, for inviting me to be a part of this. And thank you all for being open and willing to share parts of yourself with everyone here and everyone who attended virtually.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It was our pleasure.
And we don't have any walkout music. Next time, no.